In a quiet corner of the universe, Earth was just like any other day. People went about their lives unaware of the danger heading their way. On the other side of the galaxy, a massive fleet of 800,000 alien dreadnoughts was on the move. These ships were enormous, their dark shapes blocking out the stars as they glided through space. Each dreadnought was a fortress, armed with weapons powerful enough to destroy entire cities in a single blow. Commander Varkon, the leader of the alien fleet, sat in his command chair, watching the stars move past him. His skin was a deep shade of green, and his eyes glowed with confidence. He had spent years planning this attack, and now the moment was finally here. He turned to his crew and said, "Prepare for the final approach. Earth will soon be ours." As the fleet traveled closer to Earth, the situation on the planet began to change. Scientists at the United Nations Space Command detected the incoming dreadnoughts. They immediately held an emergency meeting, gathering leaders and experts from around the world. The room was filled with tension and fear as they discussed the best way to defend their planet. Dr. Elena Ramirez, a brilliant scientist, stood up. "We have advanced defense systems in place," she said, "but we must act quickly. We need to strengthen our shields and prepare our weapons." Her voice was firm, but inside she felt a wave of fear. The sheer number of ships was overwhelming. General Mark Thompson, a tough and experienced soldier, nodded. "We can't let them reach our cities. We must intercept them before they get too close." He was determined to protect his home. Everyone in the room knew what was at stake. The fate of Earth rested on their shoulders. As the dreadnoughts entered Earth's atmosphere, panic spread across the globe. People looked up at the sky, their eyes wide with fear. The ships cast dark shadows over the cities, blocking out the sun. Sirens blared, and people rushed to find safety. Families huddled together, praying that they would survive the coming storm. In the command center, the scientists and military personnel worked tirelessly. They activated the defense systems, which hummed to life. Massive laser turrets rose from the ground, ready to fire. Shields shimmered around key cities, creating a protective barrier. The world was coming together for a common cause, united against a terrifying threat. As the dreadnoughts approached, Varkon watched with anticipation. He believed that this would be an easy victory. "Earth's defenses will crumble before us," he declared. "We will show them the power of our empire." His crew cheered, their voices echoing in the vastness of space. But on Earth, hope began to flicker. The leaders knew they had to fight. "We have one chance to protect our planet," General Thompson said, rallying his troops. "We will stand together and face them head-on. For our families, for our future." The soldiers nodded, their faces set with determination. As the first wave of dreadnoughts fired their weapons, bright flashes lit up the sky. The ground shook as explosions rocked the cities. The initial attack was fierce, but the humans fought back. Lasers shot into the air and missiles flew toward the alien ships. The battle for Earth had begun. Amidst the chaos, a young soldier named Alex found himself at the front lines. He was scared, but he remembered his training. "I must protect my home," he thought. With every ounce of courage, he fired his weapon at the nearest dreadnought. To his surprise, it hit the target, and the ship exploded in a fiery blaze. Cheers erupted among the troops. They were fighting back. The battle was fierce, and Earth's defenders were determined to show the aliens that they would not go down without a fight. The first part of this epic struggle had begun, and humanity was ready to prove its strength. With the echoes of explosions ringing in their ears and the resolve to protect their home, the soldiers prepared for the fight of their lives. They knew this was just the beginning, and they were ready to stand their ground against the alien dreadnoughts. The air was thick with smoke and chaos as the battle for Earth intensified. Explosions lit up the sky, turning day into night. Alien dreadnoughts floated ominously above, their dark silhouettes contrasting sharply against the fiery explosions below. Earth's defenders fought bravely, but the odds were stacked against them. In the command center, General Mark Thompson monitored the battle closely. His brow furrowed with concern as he saw the dreadnoughts firing powerful beams of energy toward the ground. "We need to step up our defenses!" he shouted, his voice ringing with urgency. The soldiers around him scrambled to follow his orders, their faces determined despite the fear that lingered in the air. Meanwhile, Alex, the young soldier, was in the thick of the fight. He could hardly believe what was happening around him. The roar of explosions drowned out his thoughts, but he focused on the mission at hand. "Stay calm," he whispered to himself. You can do this. With each passing moment, he felt the adrenaline pumping through his veins. He took aim at an alien ship that hovered low, its weapons charging up for another attack. He pulled the trigger and watched in awe as his shot hit the target. The dreadnought shuddered, smoke billowing from its side before it spiraled down to the ground, crashing into a nearby building. "Yeah, we got one!" Alex shouted, pumping his fist in the air. His fellow soldiers cheered, and for a brief moment hope surged through them. But their joy was short-lived. A second wave of dreadnoughts emerged, more determined than ever. Varkon, aboard his flagship, was furious. "We will not lose to these inferior beings," he roared, his eyes blazing with anger. The alien commander ordered a full-scale assault, and the dreadnoughts responded. Laser beams rained down on the city, destroying everything in their path. Buildings crumbled and fire engulfed the streets. Panic spread as civilians fled for their lives, seeking shelter from the relentless attack. Back at the command center, Dr. Elena Ramirez shouted, "We need to regroup. Our forces are spread too thin." General Thompson nodded in agreement. "Pull back the troops from the outer edges. We need to concentrate our firepower in the city center. That's where we can make the biggest impact." As soldiers fell back, they made their way to the heart of the city, where the defenses were stronger. Alex and his unit were among them, their spirits lifted by the hope of a better chance of survival. They set up a defensive line, ready to face the incoming dreadnoughts. "Hold your positions!" General Thompson's voice came through their radios. "We will show them that Earth will not back down." With renewed determination, the defenders prepared for the next wave of attacks. They activated their most powerful weapons, missiles that could pierce the armor of the dreadnoughts. The tension in the air was palpable as they awaited the enemy. Suddenly, the sky lit up with flashes of green and blue as the alien ships descended. The ground trembled as they unleashed a barrage of fire. The defenders fired back, their missiles streaking through the air, exploding against the hulls of the dreadnoughts. One by one, the ships began to fall. The sound of victory rang through the ranks of the defenders, pushing them to fight harder. Alex, fueled by adrenaline and a sense of duty, shouted to his fellow soldiers, "We can do this! For Earth!" But the battle was far from over. Varkon, realizing that his forces were suffering losses, decided to send in his elite fighters. These smaller ships zipped through the chaos, dodging fire as they targeted the defenders' positions. They swooped low, firing lasers that cut through everything in their path. The defenders found themselves in a new kind of danger. "Stay sharp," General Thompson ordered. "We have to protect our flank." Alex's heart raced as he aimed at one of the small alien fighters. He fired, hitting the ship and causing it to spin out of control. As the battle raged on, the city became a war zone, filled with the sounds of destruction and the cries of brave soldiers fighting for their homes. With every blast, with every falling dreadnought, humanity stood a little taller, refusing to yield in the face of overwhelming odds. The tide of the battle was uncertain, but one thing was clear: Earth's defenders would fight to the last breath. They would show the dreadnoughts that they were not just fighting a battle, they were fighting for their survival, for their families, and for the future of their planet. And they were ready to face whatever came next. As the sun began to set, casting a red glow over the city, the battle for Earth raged on. Smoke filled the air, and the sound of explosions echoed through the streets. The dreadnoughts loomed above, their dark forms casting shadows that covered entire neighborhoods. But beneath those shadows, humanity was rising to the challenge. General Mark Thompson gathered his commanders in the command center. "We can't let them push us back any further," he said, his voice strong and determined. "We need a counterattack. We've taken losses, but we still have our will to fight." The room buzzed with energy as officers nodded, ready to act. Dr. Elena Ramirez stood next to him, her mind racing with ideas. "What if we use our drones to distract the dreadnoughts?" she suggested. "We can send in a wave of drones to confuse them while we regroup our ground forces." "That's a brilliant idea," General Thompson replied. "Let's do it! Get the drones in the air now!" Outside, Alex and his fellow soldiers were digging in, readying themselves for the next phase of the battle. They could see the dreadnoughts hovering in the distance, their weapons charging for another attack. The young soldier felt the weight of fear, but he also felt something else: determination. He was not going to let his home fall without a fight. "Ready your weapons!" he shouted to his comrades, who were busy loading missiles and checking their equipment. "We need to hold the line!" With a fierce shout, Alex fired into the air, aiming for an approaching dreadnought. His shot connected, sending sparks flying. The ship trembled but remained airborne, a reminder of the overwhelming power of the enemy. He grit his teeth, knowing they had to keep fighting despite the odds. Meanwhile, in the skies above, the drones were launched. They zipped through the air, creating a buzzing cloud of metal. The small machines were fast and nimble, darting around the dreadnoughts and drawing their fire. Varkon watched in frustration as his crew struggled to hit the fast-moving targets. "Focus on the drones," he ordered, his patience wearing thin. As the drones danced around the alien ships, the defenders seized the opportunity. General Thompson commanded the ground forces to advance. "Now! Attack!" he shouted. The soldiers surged forward, their hearts pounding with adrenaline. The streets were alive with movement as the soldiers pushed toward the enemy. Missiles flew from the ground, hitting the dreadnoughts with explosive force. Each blast ignited hope within the defenders, fueling their will to fight back. Alex, caught up in the excitement, shouted, "We can win this! Don't let them intimidate you." He fired again, and this time the shot struck true. Another dreadnought shuddered and began to fall from the sky. The soldiers around him cheered, their spirits lifted. But the battle was far from over. Varkon, realizing that his fleet was under siege, decided to unleash his secret weapon. He activated a hidden armada of small fighter ships that had been lurking in the shadows. These ships darted out from behind the dreadnoughts, ready to turn the tide of battle. "Prepare for the fighters!" General Thompson shouted, his voice booming. "Everyone, hold your positions!" The soldiers braced themselves as the smaller ships zoomed toward them, firing rapid bursts of energy. The air crackled with danger as the fighters swooped low, targeting the defenders with precision. Explosions erupted as the fighters tore through the defensive lines, wreaking havoc among the soldiers. Alex ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding a blast that exploded near him. "We have to regroup," he yelled, rallying his team. Dr. Ramirez, observing from the command center, called out, "We need to divert their fire! Let's hit them with everything we've got!" Missiles launched into the air, colliding with the alien fighters. The defenders fought back with renewed vigor. They worked together, using their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver the enemy. In the thick of the battle, Alex felt a surge of courage. He aimed his weapon at an approaching fighter and squeezed the trigger. The shot flew straight, hitting the enemy ship and causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. He couldn't help but smile, feeling the thrill of victory course through him. The tide began to turn. The fighters, overwhelmed by the defenders' firepower, started to retreat. "We can do this!" Alex shouted, adrenaline fueling his voice. The defenders pressed on, their spirits soaring as they fought back against the alien menace. As the last of the fighters fell from the sky, a collective cheer erupted from the soldiers. They had faced incredible odds and refused to back down. In that moment, they knew they were fighting not just for survival, but for the very essence of what it meant to be human. But Varkon was not ready to give up. As the dreadnoughts continued to hover above, he began to plan his next move, determined to reclaim his advantage. Humanity had fought back, but the battle was far from over. The fate of Earth still hung in the balance, and both sides were prepared to fight until the end. The battle for Earth had reached a critical moment. Smoke filled the sky, and the city was a war zone. Explosions echoed, shaking the ground as both sides fought fiercely. The dreadnoughts hovered above, their menacing presence still a heavy weight on humanity's heart. However, a spark of hope flickered among the defenders as they regrouped after their recent successes. "Stay together!" Alex shouted, leading his squad through the chaos. They ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the blasts. "We can't let them separate us!" As they reached the city center, they saw General Thompson and Dr. Elena Ramirez gathering the remaining soldiers. The tension in the air was palpable. "Listen up!" the general shouted, commanding everyone's attention. "We've faced overwhelming odds before, and we can do it again. We need a final stand! We're not just defending our city, we're defending our home!" The soldiers nodded, determination returning to their faces. "What's the plan, General?" Elena asked, her eyes focused on the dreadnoughts looming above. "We need to strike them where they least expect it," he replied, formulating a bold strategy. "If we can lure the dreadnoughts down to our level, we can target their weak points more effectively. We'll set traps and concentrate our fire on the lead ships." The defenders moved quickly to set up defenses. They positioned missiles and explosives around the city center, preparing for the final showdown.
"Get ready!"
Alex shouted, adrenaline pumping through him.
"This is it!"
As the first wave of dreadnoughts descended, the ground shook. Alex could see the alien ships preparing to fire. "Now!" General Thompson shouted, and the defenders unleashed their firepower. Missiles shot into the sky, hitting the nearest dreadnought. The explosion lit up the night, and the defenders cheered. But Varkon was ready for this. He ordered his ships to spread out, avoiding the traps that the defenders had set. "Fire back!" he commanded, rage fueling his voice. The dreadnoughts returned fire, and the ground trembled under the impact of their blasts.
"Keep firing! Don't let up!"
Alex shouted, determination burning in his chest. He aimed his weapon at the nearest dreadnought, squeezing the trigger. The missile flew straight and true, striking the ship's energy core. It shuddered violently before erupting into a massive explosion. The defenders roared with excitement, but Varkon was furious. "They think they can win?" he growled, his eyes narrowed. "They will pay for their arrogance." He ordered his fleet to regroup and attack with even greater force. The battle raged on with explosions lighting up the sky. The defenders fought valiantly, but the dreadnoughts were relentless. Each time they took down one ship, two more took its place. Alex felt the weight of despair creeping in, but he refused to give up. "We can't let them break us!" he yelled, urging his squad to keep going. As the fight continued, Dr. Ramirez had an idea. "General, what if we use the remaining drones to create a diversion? If we can distract them, we might find a way to take down the flagship." "That's a risk worth taking," Thompson replied, nodding.
"Do it!"
The drones launched into the air, zipping around the dreadnoughts and drawing their fire. As the alien ships turned to engage the drones, the defenders seized the opportunity. "Now's our chance!" Alex shouted. "Focus fire on the flagship!" The soldiers concentrated their attacks on the largest dreadnought, pouring every missile and shot they had into it. The flagship began to shake under the relentless assault, and the defenders felt a flicker of hope. But Varkon was desperate. "Rally the troops! We will not fall here!" he shouted, anger boiling within him. The flagship returned fire, aiming at the defenders with ferocity. Explosions erupted around them, and the ground shook. Amidst the chaos, Alex spotted a glowing weakness on the flagship. "That's it!" he shouted, his heart racing. "If we hit that spot, we might take it down." With renewed determination, he led his squad toward the flagship, dodging blasts and debris. They set up their missiles, targeting the weak point. "On my mark!" Alex yelled, adrenaline surging through him. "Ready!" His squad responded, focused and ready to strike. "Now!" he shouted, and they fired their missiles. The projectiles flew through the air, colliding with the flagship in a blinding explosion. The ship shook violently, and for a moment it seemed like the sky had shattered. With a final roar, the flagship erupted, sending debris cascading down. The remaining dreadnoughts, seeing their flagship fall, began to retreat. The defenders stood in awe, hearts pounding with victory. They had done the impossible. They had turned the tide of the battle and defended their home. Cheers erupted among the soldiers as they celebrated their hard-fought victory. "We did it!" Alex shouted, feeling the weight of exhaustion lift. They had stood together against a powerful enemy, and against all odds they had won. But even as they celebrated, they knew the war was not truly over. Earth had faced its greatest challenge, and while they had triumphed this day, they remained vigilant, ready to defend their world against any threat that may come again.